Mountie, you were in the RCMP, you were in the Army for a little bit on the ERT team. Were you always this guy that needed a team to be doing things with?
No, not at all. I mean, I've always had the capacity to do things as an individual.
Hmm.
I always preferred doing things with a good team. There's only so much you can take on by yourself. I don't care how efficient you are. There's only 24 hours in a day, and there's only one of you to do various things. And of course, life gets in the way. You have the kids, you have this, you have that, and I don't want to make it sound like my kids are getting in the way, but the reality is you can't just dedicate yourself to 100% to absolutely everything you do. Otherwise, you'll be running out of time. So having a team, I found, is the best way you can then sort of establish a vision and establish a culture and do so, with the utmost foresight, so to speak, and then have these people that are wanting to be there, that are volunteering for certain tasks, that are selected for certain tasks to basically jump on board and carry the ship. And after that, you just watch the ship leave the port, and
Hmm.
you're providing bearings from time to time, right?
Right. No, for
But
sure.
there is something truly, I guess, truly gratifying in being able to sort of let people spread their wings and do the things that you are set forth to do as the leader and watch them excel.
Absolutely. Growing up, were you this person that knew that I wanted to be in the military? I wanted to be on the in law enforcement. Was that something that you knew?
Yeah, yeah. Right away, I was very young when I already started, playing the games and the war games and the police games. And of course, none of this are games really, but when you're a kid, they are. And I was, from a very young age, probably around 4 or 5, was already sort of directing myself that way. And mom used to say that to me all the time, like you've been wanting to do what it is that you've set forth to do and that you did your entire life. I mean, you've never really changed. There were some hiccups along the way, evidently, in my teenage years and being a little shithead and whatnot. But I eventually, sort of refocus on the path, and that's when everything turned for me.
Was martial arts a big thing for you growing up, or was that later on in life you said I will take martial arts on and specifically BJJ?
Hmm. Yeah, no, I started when I was 3. So my mom was a single mom, and I didn't have a dad in the picture. So she figured, I better, there's only so much I can teach him. And so she wanted to make sure that I was prepared for whatever, life's challenges, especially in a physical safety realm, and had me in martial arts when I was very, very young. So it's been a huge part of my life for my entire life, probably 42 years now. So
42
yeah.
years. Yeah, I started martial arts at 4 years old, Hapkido.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I did it 16, 17 years, and then I just stopped. Life happened and you just move on. And I wish I didn't. And I,
Hmm.
and I told Sean yesterday, I said, I think I need to try BJJ.
Hmm.
So I had reached out to a guy a couple days ago and I said, I think I might come down to your class and see if I can get back into it because I don't know, it takes you back. But I've heard BJJ is so different than Hapkido, Taekwondo. It's a different art, ground grappling and rolling.
Hmm. Yeah, man. Like, um, Jiu-jitsu is, in my opinion, and this is coming from somebody that has a traditional martial arts background, and I've spent many, many years in various styles of martial arts. BJJ has an uncanny ability to replicate life so with such precision and accuracy that it is completely insane how metaphorically applicable BJJ is to life. And you can go on podcasts and speak to this until you're blue in the face, and nobody will give a single care until they get in and experience it. And then they turn around and go, I know exactly what you meant when you said this on that podcast or this podcast. Jiu-jitsu is a different beast. And, you know, the journey of becoming better than you were yesterday is just unbelievable and very gratifying and also very self motivating. And it's really interesting when you start talking about motivation and sacrifices and the difference between the two, and motivation fades, and we all know this, but there are certain things in life that are going to give you micro doses of motivation, and it helps to set a goal, to go out and run an ultra marathon or a marathon. It helps to set a goal to compete in a jiu-jitsu tournament. It helps to set a goal to becoming better at whatever field of endeavor you're interested in. And so I would say, you know, probably one of the greatest journey you'll ever embark on. One of the ways that I would kind of look at it from a performance coaching standpoint would be, don't look at it like you going backwards, because you're actually not. So you're not getting back into it. This is something you've never been into, right?
Saying,
And so it's a different mindset when you are getting back into something. There's also an implication that you left that something for a reason. You had taken what was required out of that something and what you could optimize your performance going forward, and you've decided to move on. That's because you have moved on to other things, right? And so for me, instead of saying, I would love to try BJJ, the trying process in BJJ is a constant refinement, because you have to do it, multiple times a week or whatever the case may be. And it takes months and years to be any good at it. But the fact is, every day you're better than yesterday, which is what you need to focus on. But also, you're not going back into anything that you left behind because you had taken everything out of. You've never actually been there. So this is a completely new venture for you, and it's a new challenge for you. And that will bring a level of positive growth that you can't even fathom right now because you haven't experienced it. But when we speak in a year, you'll be like, man, mind blown.
wow. Yeah, the master was always a beginner, and now it's almost like I have to start again from ground zero.
Yeah, but you know what, man? Like, there's always segues between martial arts, right? And a lot of the neurological rewiring that you acquired in your previous martial arts, you'll carry over to this martial art. So, body movements and body positions in space and time and all those things are going to come more naturally to you because of your martial arts background. And so those things are not mutually exclusive. It's not like, let me forget absolutely everything I learned. This is who you are as a result of what you did. And that person is entering in jiu-jitsu now, bringing all that knowledge, skills, and experience with them. So I wouldn't discount that. And you'll make a lot of segues between Apkido. And I can tell you this because I have lots of friends that did Apkido for years. And they often, when we do stand-up drills or things, they will bring some of their experience into the stand-up realm, so that we can, because jiu-jitsu doesn't start until you're on the ground. And no, unlike popular belief, you're not supposed to just sit on the ground. There's supposed to be some sort of takedown procedures here, especially if you wish to use this in the application of your legal authorities, like jobs, for example, in policing, amongst other things.
Speaking of policing, I
Mhm.
live in Calgary, Alberta here, and there are many friends of mine that are officers that are taking BJJ.
Yeah.
And for me, I was curious to know is why that martial art specifically versus Aikido or Taekwondo or karate?
hmm Well, there's various reasons, but I will say this: any let me give you a bit of try to exemplify this the best I can. If you are striking with anybody, so you're throwing punches and you're hitting as hard as you can, there's an element of luck in there. There's an element of luck that if the wrong person connects at the right time in the right spot, you're going to sleep, right? And if you're going to sleep in policing, you might as well be dead. We know that cops are killed with their own weapons most of the time, with a majority of the time. And we also know that their ability to interfere with whatever criminal activity or process is occurring isn't going to happen if they're unconscious, right? So the risk is massive that way. You can be a lifelong martial artist trained in striking, go strike against somebody that has thrown 10 punches in the last 10 years and he just so happened to connect, and you're going to sleep. right? Whereas if you take anybody that doesn't have any ground fighting abilities and you put them against anybody at the blue, purple, and brown level, even let alone black, that person literally stands no chance at all, you know. And I'm sure statistically speaking, yes, there probably is a 0.0000, but let's call a spade a spade. The likelihood of that happening is so much less, right? The fact that you are live sparring all the time in jiu-jitsu, so there is no make believe. You're not yes, there is cooperative drilling that's occurring, but there's no make believe. Like, you either can do what you can do or you can't, and it either works or it doesn't. And so it's not so much about an over reliance on this. You want your police officers to have the ability to strike. You want them to have the abilities to sustain an assault coming via strikes, and then to take the fight wherever it is that they need to take it, to restrain the mobility, because we know that a moving problem is always worse than a problem that's static, right? So it's not unusual for cops to take suspects down. It's easier for control cuffing techniques. It restricts their mobility and prevents them from having the ability to kind of move around, create angles, and make, harsher dilemmas for cops. And so there is a variety of different things that are entering in that. And people, oh, well, you shouldn't go to the ground. Well, go ahead and watch 30 years of police videos, and you will see that almost every single one of them ends up on the ground. Almost every single one of them, every time. And now it's not just the cops taking people down, it's cops being taken down by people that have actually some knowledge, skills, and abilities. And that is a terrifying prospect if you don't know what you're doing. Literally, if you do not know how to swim and you swim with great white sharks, what are the chances that you'll overcome? Very, very slim. And so that's what makes BJJ very different. I mean, there's other things that are excellent from policing. In judo, for example, excellent for policing. You know, Apkido is good for policing also for the stand-up portion. But again, if you don't have the ground portion to follow it up, then when the control cuffing techniques are coming, or the body control techniques are coming, now you're behind, right? So
So
that is
true.
essentially why cops are training BJJ, or should.
It's so true in regards to the Aikido. When you're up, yeah, groundwork we don't have skill on, and
Mhm.
you can take me down, and maybe I'll give you an arm bar or a knife or, you know, snake bite, but there's not much there.
I'd love to see that, a snake bite.
uh, how did you decide though? I'm gonna go to the military first, and then end up as an RCMP officer, and then move towards air marshal and elite forces.
Hmm.
What do you call it? Elite forces, or what do you call it? Special unit,
An emergency response team for me.
emergency response.
Yeah, I mean, people call it SWAT. There's various names for it, but it's essentially the emergency response team. But yes, so sorry, the question is what led me to? I have no idea. I think there's a mix of various factors, and I have some inclined, but I think for me, I was on the wrong end of injustice from a very, very, very young age. And I suppose you could say, hypersensitive to injustice committed against others, the collective, whoever. And as a kid, I always stood up for people. Even though I had a hard time sort of standing up for myself at times, I was standing up for everybody else, because I felt essentially a responsibility to do so and not be there watching while somebody else was being victimized the way I had for many years. And so when the time came, the military was actually a stepping stone for me to go into policing. And the way I kind of went around going into policing, instead of going to college, doing police technology or whatever the case may be, I went the military route. I did a variety of different things to try to beef up my resume. So essentially, when I joined the military, it was a stepping stone for policing. What I did not expect was me to enjoy it as much as I did, because that's what happened next. I really, really enjoyed my time in the military. I actually thrive in that environment. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere where people were like me, kind of thing. Not like me, but they were like me, as in
Similar,
relatable.
similar
Yes.
personalities, environment. Yeah.
Hmm. And so that was the reason why I joined the military in the first place. And of course, once I received my orders to go to depot, after going through the RCMP process for several months, I was now at a crossroad where I needed to decide which one of those two paths I was going to follow. Was I going to stay the military route, or was going to do whatever it is that I'd set forth to do years prior, which was going to policing? And so I picked policing. And of course, that is prior to 9/11. So we didn't know what was coming. Otherwise, I would have made a different call. But it is what it is. Hindsight's 2020. I made the decision to go into policing, and 6 months later, 9/11 happened, right? And then I looked back, going, "Ugh, I wish I stayed." But it is what it is. I'm going to do as much as I can from this side of the fence, so to speak.
That's pretty honorable. I mean, even well, brave just to say is, yeah, I wish I was on the other side of the fence to go to Afghanistan or wherever they were going, getting deployed. That's not easy. Just that's just most people like myself, it's terrified, you're going to an
Hmm.
unknown zone, but you're trained to do that, right?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, though, any amount of training isn't going to necessarily correlate into positive action unless you have a purpose behind what you're doing and you're truly believing in that purpose. So for me, this had nothing to do with the political um, undertone of what was going on in those countries in terms of the decisions to go to war, those types of things. Those are not decisions that are made by the people that are trained to do what the political powers to
Mm, yeah.
be get them to do, so to speak. But for me, it was about being with my peers, the people I'd trained with for years when they deployed in a dangerous area. So it became about each other. And don't get me wrong, there is an overarching prospect of wanting to make a difference, even if it's a small difference. So I didn't stand by and watch. Like I actually tried to interfere, whether or not it worked. Um, and it could be argued now, a lot of our veterans are struggling with the fact that we left Afghanistan and basically the place is gone back to the Taliban controlled territory with all kinds of associated atrocities and things that we definitely would never stand for. And I think a lot of our veterans feel that their service was useless, and it could not be further from the truth, considering that it provided some measure of peace for 20 years to people growing up, growing through the system, seeing that there's better, that they can perhaps seek opportunities outside of their country, that they can seek opportunities within their country, and seek educational opportunities, those types of things. So there was a lot of good years, probably the best 20 years to the average person of the region, to
Yeah.
be alive, really. So how do you now go back and say this was completely useless? Because it was not. But I can see how it evidently sends that message, and also from a humanity standpoint, is completely unacceptable how things unfolded. There's no question there.
I mean, how many moms and dads lost their child, brothers, sisters, right? And and then you look back and say, for what? Right. And then I look at, will the future be like this in terms of 20 years from now? Will your kids be hearing about, oh, the Taliban has got all this artillery and weapons that they can now use against, the Western culture again? This is just a cycle of life and pain and peace and pain and peace. And
Yeah, it was absolutely no different than the US arming the Mujahideen, and then them turning against, and it's been done countless times. It's been done in other areas, and with guerrillas and all kinds of different armed groups. And we have to be very, very careful when we're providing, you know, logistical assistance or even military assistance in training. And I know that we're facing a common enemy. That makes sense from a tactical perspective. But the problem is you never know when allegiance is shifting, and when allegiance is shifting, and you have a super highly trained force. Not that the Taliban are super highly trained or that anybody in that region is, but certainly Now they have freaking Apache helicopters and Humvees and things, right? And also for me as a sort of a somebody that's tactically inclined, I always love to watch the news and see footage of them, the Taliban, say, walking in the background or doing something, and I'm seeing a massive difference in the way these guys are even carrying their weapons and the way they move, the way they talk to each other, how their kit is fitted, and all those things that makes it reminiscent of a lot of special operation units out there. You know, there's a lot of things that these guys are doing that were that are learned behavior that came from very well trained professionals. So now we're having a compounded issues. The knuckleheads that we had to deal with pre 9/11 are now super highly trained knuckleheads.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, because we always
uh,
heard the U.S. trading the Taliban pre 9/11, and now the U.S. now has given the Taliban the artillery and, like you said, Apaches. Have you seen the
mhm,
video of them trying to fly an Apache?
mhm.
Oh my goodness, it's
I
bizarre.
suspect there's going to be a lot of trial by learning or learning by trial by fire here.
Yes,
Trial by fire, whatever I'm trying to say.
exactly. But
But
it's interesting that they didn't do certain things that they once did. So, not to get political or anything, but when they raided
about
they
about
yes,
yeah.
In Pakistan, for Osama bin Laden, they they actually destroyed the helicopter that ended up crashing, so
Mhm.
that the individuals could not get the computers or any of the parts off of it. I'm just surprised that they left everything there for everybody. It just
Mhm.
didn't make sense.
I think one of the compounding issue is we need to understand, like, and I think most of us, especially as Canadians, we don't have an appreciation for what kind of logistical nightmare running the US military is, and what does it mean for a Marine Expeditionary Force or anybody to land somewhere in a country, and in an overseas country like this. It probably cost $1 billion to put people on the ground with their pieces of equipment, right? And it would probably cost 3 times as much to do it and take 6 months, where they're now trying to, extract themselves out of there quickly. So even for various units to actually go to each of those pieces of equipment and disable them, and I know that there was a lot of trial in doing that, but I'm gonna go on a limb and say that would have been logistically absolutely unfeasible in the time frame that they were supposed to be out of the country based on the executive orders. So
Oh,
I, I don't know. Like those are all
so many
things that are way,
factors. Yeah.
yeah, those are all things that are way above my pay grade, certainly. But I would love to look sort of deeper into this and see what the rationale was. And that's one of the key problems that we have right now is we're being told certain things and we take them at face value. But it would be really nice to kind of dive into literature and the actual source items and tracking of things so that we actually know why decisions are made, not just this is the decisions that you entrust us to make. What kind of process has this gone through so that we may support that decision at the constituent level, if that makes any sense?
That's one thing I think we as Canadians have realized over time is, you get lost. What do you trust? What do you not trust? Yeah, who do you find hope in? And oftentimes it's your friends, it's people like us doing independent things and having these kind of real conversations that are not rehearsed.
It's really interesting. I think when we start running into some major issues is when the people that we designate as the so-called experts, and certainly there are many around. The problem is when it comes to the pandemics, the experts were not all in agreement, and there was a side of that pandemics that was blatantly being muzzled, and there is no question that that's the case. And some of the people with the best credentials to speak to the pandemics were muted and canceled on account of an other viable course of action, which was disputed. And so you can have all the experts in the world, but if you start censoring them, and if you start being biased in the information that you are selecting instead of being impartial and looking at the totality of the circumstances and making a rational decision based on the facts provided, dissension included, you're having a serious issue. And I think that that's it happened. It seemed to have happened a lot during the pandemic, where somebody that had worked the project for months that eventually said, our findings are inconclusive and we cannot stand behind the statement 100%. We don't know that it is accurate or whatever. All of a sudden they were gone and somebody else was there. Yeah, we can affirm with 100% certainty. It's like, whoa, what just happened here? You know?
But
And so
things would
I'm not
shift, right? Like the media would change and things would change again. It's like next story. Yeah.
sure. There was a lot of sketchy things happening, and I'm not a big conspiracy theory, kind of person or anything like that. But the reality is, when power and money is involved, humans get weird. That is a fact, and we saw it in the first week of the pandemic. People would go to Costco, buy all the
Toilet
rolls
paper.
of toilet paper, sit in the parking lot, and sell them for 4 times the price. So what does that mean for big pharma? What does that mean for other organizations that are making multi-billion dollars a year on account of events such as this? So, without kind of rocking the boat too much, I mean, definitely it needs a critical analysis. And I think that we strayed away from making critical analysis. And what we did is we just kind of, mounted a defense for an argument that we were already super biased in, and we imposed same on the others. And if they didn't agree with us, we discounted them and canceled them, and it just took us further apart as humanity. There's no question about that.
Absolutely. What was it like being on the ERT, Lower Mainland of BC, and going into places of the unknown? So, as a breacher,
Yeah. Uh, Going to places, you mean like in a stronghold, like in a house that we'd be either raiding or doing something in? What? Well, it depends. I guess it depends who you ask. And so I can only speak for myself, but I mean, for me, it's always been about standing up to the ultimate bullies. People are evidently being victimized by certain types of people, and those types of people are generally not liking to work really, really hard unless it means incredible financial sort of fallback or whatever, however you want to call it. Like, if the only reason why, and so it's really an interesting prospect to have an opportunity to interfere with whatever it is that they're doing to the collective and the people they're victimizing. So for me, it was always a very sort of sensible, but also a very gratifying part of the job, which was to go hands on in those types of situation and be there instead of on the sidelines criticizing whoever's doing it, just to be a part of it. But I never really had a overly emotional approach to the job in one way or another, really. I said this numerous times and sometimes caught some flack for it, but it is what it is. I can't stand here and lie to everybody that's listening. For me, it was like a mathematical equation. Like, what is the problem? And I would break the problem down like a mathematical equation, basically, and resolve it the same way. Like, it wasn't a big personal attack on me. It wasn't a big us against them kind of mentality. There's a war going on out there and the cops are on one side and civilians are on the other, because it absolutely isn't the case. We already know that cops are dealing 100% of the time with 1% of the population. 1%. So it becomes their 100%, but that's a skewed reality. It's not at all what the reality is out there, right? And so for me, it was never overly emotional, just a process. There's a job to do and I'm here to do it. And this is how we're going to go about doing it. And this is the reason why we're not doing it in another certain way for this and that reason. So I have the ability to articulate that as well.
did you have to leave your emotions and feelings at home, kind of a thing?
Yeah, I mean, I could feel things. I mean, it's not like I was a robot, right? Like, I could feel compassion and those types of things, but it was a regular emotional attachment, not a overblown overinvestment, so to speak. Because has a propensity to happen in policing. Like
Oh yeah.
some people take everything personally, and some people get really affected by everything because they wear the weight of the world on their shoulders. And Atlas did it, but he's probably the only one, and and none of us are built for that.
No.
And so it's important that we have the ability to delineate the two.
When you're looking at things and you're being strategical about, again, breaching or dealing with policing in general, ERT, we're still human beings. What did you do to kind of get rid of that muscle memory, or, your mind can be clear of it and say, I'm leaving it at work, but I'm sure some of that stuff comes home in your mind.
Mhm. I actually didn't, man, to be honest with you. I didn't leave it at work. I'm of the opinion that policing and public safety in general is actually a community responsibility. It is not a police responsibility. Everybody in the community has a part to play in securing this country.
Mhm.
That includes being told what we are doing on the daily, right? That includes them having the right to hear the calls for service that we respond to, the types of incidents that we're seeing, and the ramifications of those incidents on the people doing the job. You don't get provided a cover of safety in your own country without partaking in helping, or at the very least appreciating those who do. And how do we do that? We do that by exchanging information. If the public doesn't know what it is that we are doing on the daily, and you know, their the big exposure to anything police related is the bad press in the news, which sells a lot more than good press, by the way, because there's a ton of good stuff happening every day that isn't being printed. And the reason is it doesn't create controversy and therefore doesn't sell nearly as good. And so for me, as a human being in those situations, when I came back, if something affected me, I shared it, period. Like it didn't matter if it disturbed someone or whatever, like
Mhm.
I saw it as I saw it as a community responsibility to have the conversation so that they knew what we were up to, get some measure of appreciation for the job, the difficult job that people are doing out on the street, but then also it allowed me to vent, which is therapeutic in its own way. So I had, it provided me a therapeutic relief from a variety of different sources, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, you hold that in, you're gonna burst sooner or later. You're gonna pop, and we've seen that in life. Self-inflicted too, right? So
100% it is. There's a lot of people going out where, bearing the weight of the world on their shoulders and not telling anybody. I don't want to indispose people, or I don't want to create fear or anxiety. And I want people to know, you know, um, what's the saying? Ignorance is bliss, or whatever the case may be, which couldn't be further from the truth, because you're going to be on the wrong end of that load. You are going to be on the wrong end of that burden carrying. And guess what? That's unfair to you. You're just another one of us, stepping up to trying to do something and try to make a difference. You're not perfect. You'll never be perfect. And we're not asking you to be, but what we're asking is make it so that you're healthier for longer, for everybody's sake,
mhm.
including the public that we sort of sworn to serve and protect.
You see officers struggling. They were saying things that people do, the public does for officers, go so far, and they're so appreciative because they say we get so little in credibility. Has this always been the case, or is it over the last 5, 6 years where, with social media and everything that's gone on in the world, where now officers are looked down upon, or they're the bad guys and we're and it's not the case at all.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to do like a bit of a forensic empirical research, to try to find out where this started sort of shifting, the paradigm shift. But I would say that even 20 or 30 years ago, I mean, cops weren't necessarily seen as superheroes. And you know what? They shouldn't be seen as superheroes. I don't even like when cops are called heroes. I mean, this is, you know, anybody, you want a hero. Let's talk about a single mom that has 4 kids and cancer, like that's superhero, that's a superhero status in my book. But I think And it doesn't need to be on this veneration type level. Like nobody needs that. And in fact, it's better not to give anybody that kind of clout. It's unsafe to do so. Give somebody too much power, they start believing in their own hype, and next thing you know, yeah. So I think what's important is as long as we recognize as a community that it's a very, very difficult job, that it's a very dynamic job, and the inversely, as long as we as cops or officers or whatever, military or whoever, have the right strategy to communicate some of the things that we're doing and the reasons why we're doing them, I think there's a bit of a shroud of secrecy around police operation and military operation, and even some of the calls that we're getting, under investigations, all those things. It's like, how much of this can we actually, without compromising active investigations and without compromising the safety of the members on the streets, share with the public so that they understand better our reality? And if you think that that's futile, you're on the wrong end of this whole operation here, because a lot of departments have done it for years and have seen incredible results in the support they're getting, even through financial means, or just everything. They establish their character, and once they've established their character, the people they are sworn to serve and protect are actually entrusting of them. And so if they come up and say, we need extra money for this, that, and the other thing, then they're less likely to be objected against, or whatever the case may be. And so I think that we have done a very poor job, excuse me, in communicating with the public, which is on us. There's nobody else to be blamed for that. And then also, there has been a few key things occurring, done by individuals that unfortunately are carrying the flag of a certain agency or a certain organization, and we know what happens when that happens. Everybody under the same umbrella gets put on their, as if they were all one and the same. And the reality is, people mess up in organizations all the time. And not everybody in that organizations had anything to do with that. In fact, most people would be sort of denouncing that as much as anybody else, any other members from the public. So if not worse, because we do not like people that reflects negatively on our organizations, our people, So it's a compounding. There's a lot there, and there's a lot to unpack. And then we haven't even spoken about the ramifications of even the pandemic during dealing with some of these politically loaded issues. And so now you're starting to add another piece and another piece and another piece. And eventually what happens is, humans don't have the ability to really separate emotions. So their emotions are everywhere now. So it makes us as humanoid very unstable, and have a hard time making critical analysis on things, because we're too emotionally invested. And so
Well, it's true.
this was, I would say, the last couple of years was really, really, that was the context in which policing was viewed
You know,
for many.
I put up I reposted something not long ago for Constable Hong that passed away. Posted something, and the amount of officers that reached out and said, "Thank you. You don't know how much this means to me." And I said, "What do you mean? I'm just reposting." Yeah, but we don't get that even from the public ever. Thinking, really? How villainified are you guys in this situation right now? It's heartbreaking. I have friends that are officers, and put a uniform on and you're going to work. That's what you're doing. It's no different than the transit driver. It's no different than this other person. Whatever the political landscapes or whatever, again, like we said, in an organization, if somebody does something bad, should not reflect the whole organization. We see, I don't know, a car company. Something goes wrong or faulty with the car company. Does every employee, including the dealerships, get in trouble? No. It's you. I work at Dodge now. All of a sudden, you're a bad person because Dodge safety or their seatbelts don't work. It doesn't work like that. So why is there such a focus on, oh, you're an officer, you're in trouble, you're a bad person, and
Mm-hmm.
now that person goes out in the public and they're getting that feedback, that energy exchange. Again,
Mm-hmm.
we're a human being in a uniform, and those eyes that are looking at you, sometimes it's not even the voices, it's the eyes that are looking at you, and the hate, that energy, humans can feel that exchange. Yeah. It's not
Eh,
good.
You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. And I will go and kind of carry on a bit on that same segue, but feeling that type of energy, the propensity is to react offensively, right? So the propensity is not to be like, I'm gonna let this slide on my back, on my like water on a duck.
Hmm.
The propensity is, you're giving me aggression, you're giving me negative energy, I'm going to send you back aggression and negative energy, because we feel as humans that we have to go head to head with things. And oftentimes, the best way to resolve something is to go and to flank the person. Patton said, the person who flanks first wins. That is true and metaphorically applicable to life. And I think we as humans and as police officers, we need to understand that for me to retaliate in a public setting, so say where somebody is giving me a dirty look, and for me to even reciprocate that
Yeah.
look, essentially um, validates whatever the person is doing in their own eyes. Whereas if I'm not doing anything, they kind of stay at the same level. I hate cops, they're all useless, whatever. That's totally fine. But if I hate cops and look, this cops is looking at me, he hates me too. So now it actually exponentially, and I mean, this is not scientific by any stretch of the imagination,
It's human
but
beings in general, right? It's the same. Yeah.
this is how things build up. Resentment, emotions such as resentment, which are extremely difficult to overcome later. So for me, it's understanding that the job we do and the uniform we wear unfortunately represents a flag, or represents something, and when you wear it, it's no longer about you. It's everything you do has an impact on other people. And when somebody is looking at you with disdain in their eyes, or they're looking at you with any sort of negative emotions, they're not looking at you, Mario, the constable in Toronto. They're looking at the Toronto police, a government that So you have to kind of shift that mindset. You are a tool of an organization, and that organization is what's being frowned upon by whoever. So don't make it about you, because it was never about you. And even if the person makes it personal, once they find out what your name is and they call you and tell, whatever the case may be, it's still about the organization. It had nothing to do in the first place with you in the first place. So if you weren't in the organization, you've never would have experienced that in that manner for those reasons. So it's just understanding that as a person that walks around in uniform, and yeah, people are going to look at you all kinds of ways. Just be, as gentle and open and genuine and real and confident as you can, and respectful, and that's all you can do.
Seb, you've seen some of the craziest things. I mean, breaching doors, being on the ERT, gangs, violence, you name it. How do you stay so calm and have found peace when there's so much chaos that you just have seen and witnessed that we don't see? Like again, the movies show us, we don't see what
Hmm.
we see.
Yeah. um I think it's critical to stay grounded, right? Like, you have to, regardless of, I think jumping on a chaotic bandwagon is probably the worst thing for anybody to do. I mean, it doesn't serve any purpose, and it just makes your life absolute misery. And so for me, I've always sort of pride myself in being the calm in chaos, being able to control chaos to a certain extent. And certainly, I think it permeated my entire career, as I refuse to be one of those people that shows up somewhere where everybody's panicking and just start panicking too. You know, like, nobody has ever done anything positive while in a state of panic. It just doesn't happen, right? So if you imagine, if I said to you, okay, let's start rounding out the scenarios. Let's talk about parachuting. Let's talk about diving. Let's talk about flying an airplane. Let's talk about driving a car. Let's talk about absolutely everything that's high risk and high levels of consequences. And let's see in each of those scenarios if anything actually is helped by panicking. Because the answer is no. Like, you don't need to look into it. It's just not happening, right? So having the ability to take a step back, detach from your emotions, take a breath. And I know you and Sean spoke about box
Breath.
breathing, do all this good stuff. Those are all techniques and procedures that you certainly can use to help yourself negotiate some of the emotions associated with being a human being, but also associated with being in the critical circumstances that we face on the daily. And just one call at a time, one day at a time, and not the entire world is burning and like what the media wants you to believe. And I think
Recession's here, and yeah.
keeping perspective, man,
Mm-hmm. How important was it to find stability within yourself despite being in very stressful situations?
Well, I mean, I can't be in line with what we just discussed. Like I really can't be of any assistance to anyone if I'm not in control of myself to begin with. And when I say in control, don't get me wrong here. I don't have everything under control, right? Like I think the propensity with humans is to look at the neighbors, especially in the age of social media and people putting up whatever they want you to see. It's easy for me to turn around, look at the neighbors and be, look at this, man, this guy, he's got it all figured out. And I think it's a disservice to humanity to even venture in that proposition, because it's absolutely not the case. Nobody has it all together, and everybody has their own challenges and the things that can rile them up and that kind of stuff. And I think we forget that as humans sometimes. For me, I let regular emotions flow through me. Like if I experienced something, I just lived it, and yeah, I didn't exteriorize it the way some might. I kind of lived it, but I allowed myself to feel a certain way, and then I went to work, not dwelling on things and rehashing things over and over again. And it's like, have I done my absolute best based on the totality of the circumstances that I was provided at the time? If the answer is yes, stop beating yourself up. If the answer is no, I was lazy, I didn't prepare properly, I didn't mentally rehearse, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, well, then there's a lot of things that can be improved upon. And yes, I can see how that can kind of spin in your head. But for me, I knew that I would be of no help to anybody if I wasn't in a balanced state.
They say we put the oxygen mask on first before helping others, right?
100%. There's a reason for that.
It's tough because you can get caught up in the victim mentality of life, right? Finally, people are caring for me because I'm a victim, and screw the world. How does someone that's in that place get out of it? Like, what did you do when you get into dark places, especially in your mind?
Yeah, I think having a process for introspection is very personalized and individual to everybody. My process may not work for somebody else. I'm the type of guy that has, really harsh conversations in the mirror with myself. And if I start spewing stuff out that shouldn't be coming out of my mouth because it's deflecting blame onto others, or it's whatever the case may be, I will call myself out immediately. There is no safe haven for for exteriorizing things that are not appropriate, or things that definitely shouldn't be exteriorized in that fashion. So I'll give you an example of that, and how this is actually might exemplify a little bit better what I'm speaking about. But so I'm doing uh, a master's of counterterrorism right now. Okay. And I haven't been to school in 25 years. And yes, I've learned things because I've been on various courses during my policing career and whatnot. But higher learnings and higher education is a very different ballgame. And it's a lot more complex, and it's a lot more difficult and challenging. And I love it. But out of my cohort, there's some people with PhDs in there, and there's a lot of smart academics within the 15 people cohort. One of those ladies yesterday posted something on the group. We have a group chat, and she said she was asking one of the primary facilitator, which email should I be sending our 3,000 word essay, which is due in 10 weeks. Where can I send it? I'm done. And so my first emotional reaction, knowing that I'm behind, let alone written off the project for 10 weeks from now, was Well, she must not have anything else to do, or now. And I caught myself immediately, and I'm like, you know what? You are going to stop that, and you're going to stop that yesterday. Don't put it on her. This is not on her. You didn't do what you were supposed to do. And now she's taught you that you need to elevate your game. That is your job. You need to elevate. And I don't even care what the complexities surrounding the whole thing is. Maybe she's got 19 hours a day to do work. Maybe she's got whatever. Her reality does not impact me.
It
But
doesn't
what I,
matter.
but what I didn't like was my propensity to become the victim in that very scenario. 10 minutes later, 10 minutes later, after sitting there thinking about my reaction, I sent a message on the group and I basically said to her, you know, what you have done just elevated me to another level. And now I'm sitting at home and I'm in hour number 6 of my studying because of what you have done. So I thank you for that. Thank you for leading the way. But see what the difference is here? It would have been really easy for me to go down the rabbit hole of make believe and think that I knew everything about her circumstances, which I know none of, and make assumptions that clearly would have been wrong. And therefore taking the responsibility off of my own shoulders to be better and know better. You know,
Choices.
man, 100%. So it's not about not having that propensity, and that's what people are often confused with because they're like, "Oh, you don't think that way." No, not the case. I do think that way, like any other humans, but then I fix it, which doesn't always happen with other people, right? So having the ability to look at a situation, feel our emotional reaction and how we are being reactionary and why, and then start breaking down our inner workings. Why is this making me uncomfortable? Why is this making me feel like I haven't done anything this week? And yet I've studied 40 hours and I'm not even close to having ended out my 3,000, word essay. It doesn't matter. Focus where you can. How do I regain control of this? And how do I come out of this better?
Gosh, we do that. I mean, in so many times of my own life, I've done that where you can go the other way. Your mind will say, make excuses, right? But you got to call yourself out on your own bullshit. That's the thing.
All the time
Yeah.
and be ruthless. People are, and when I say people, it sounds like a generalization. Not everybody does that, but a lot of people will do that where, cut yourself a break, cut yourself some slack, you know, man, like you haven't obsessed about anything ever. You don't need slack. You need to work. Yeah. And when I say work, I don't mean work necessarily for the man or anything like that, but I mean, you need to work on the things that you are wanting to achieve, you know, to make another segue in the same kind of vein, every time you speak to somebody that speaks to you about, say, their working out uh, sort of routine, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I really got to get back into it. You never were into it. You never were into it ever. Just don't say you have to get back into shape because you've always done things on a mediocre level. And so you were mediocre at best, which is totally acceptable if it's the best you can be at the time.
Do you think people want to just say, yeah, I just want to be okay at this. I don't need to be great. Just need to be okay.
I don't have an issue with that at all. What I have an issue with is as that okay becomes easier for you, then what? Now you're stagnant, right? So it's not about not accepting a certain level of proficiency. Like, for example, if I wanted to be a jiu-jitsu world champ, I would have to put 10 times the work I'm putting in now. There's no question on that, right? And so if the outcome that I am seeking is way outside of the effort that I'm putting in, it's never happening because it's not congruent. I understand that. And we don't have time to invest 100,000, uh, everything we have in one endeavor because we have many things to do. So oftentimes it's not something that we really realistically can do. But that's not to say that we do not seek personal growth as a human being. That is a critical piece, critical and it starts with introspection. There is nothing that happens without us having the conversations about ourselves and how we are reacting to situations to understand how we can do it better.
Yeah. I mean, oh, I just, yeah, there's a lot of times where we will just say things, and I don't know. You like you said, you hear people tell us, "Oh, you just gotta be gentle with yourself, and just take time. Don't put a lot of pressure into what you want to do. Just if you want to do it, it'll come slowly, and believe in the universe and all these things." How much is uh spirit in terms of belief versus execution? Because how much work do you really need to put in and rely on the universe?
Hmm. That's a very philosophical question, and one that I'm sure has been kicking around since the beginning of times, or at least since the beginning of modern humanoids as we know them. You know, it's really interesting, man. I think spiritual journey is really much an individual thing. I think that everybody has their opinion on it, and I think that people that have zero spiritual incline are and will experience issues. People that are all about spirituality will experience issues. So you have to have a well balanced formula. You need to, yes. And so the way I kind of do it is I'm going to put in as much work as I can, and I'm going to try to do it for the right reasons. And as soon as for myself, anyways, and in my life, it's been the case, every time I invest in a collective, the universe seemingly pays me back dividend. And I'm talking about from incredible gratification to having opportunities that were never given to anybody else, so to speak. And so I do feel personally that if I focus on myself too much, I get self-absorbed to the point where the universe does not reciprocate the way it does when I pay back into the collective. And so I strongly urge people that are having issues getting better or being better or dragging themselves out of a hole to sometimes land a hand somewhere else and watch what happens when that happens. And it starts, creating this network of people that are trustworthy, that work together, the synergy and all these other concepts that are very nebulous in nature, but truly, truly impactful if you start looking at them deeply. And I think that's kind of the way that you have to do what works for you. I know for myself, the spiritual piece, my spiritual piece is the path isn't going to be lit up fully. And I understand that. I know which general direction I want to go, and I know which general direction I should be going as a human being. And I'm going to aim for that direction, and I'm going to go one step at a time. And I'm going to, sort of see where the path is as the lights are appearing along the way, not necessarily be fully lit up. And you have to have some faith in the universe that you are doing what you are meant to do, that you are doing it in the way that you are meant to do it, and that you are maximizing your life experience. The rest ain't up to you. And that comes back to another piece, which is your sphere of influence. What is your sphere of influence? The things you can directly impact, the things that you have some influence over, and the things that you absolutely have zero influence over at all. Those things don't even enter my mind mostly. It's like, I have no control over this. Out it goes. Doesn't matter, because it's gonna get me to be very, very frustrated and anxious and angry and whatever if I start weighing the weight of the world. But again, if there are certain areas that I can actually make a difference, I will focus on that. And if there's areas that I can influence, I will focus on that. Now, if there is something I have zero influence over, but there is a way for me to gain that influence by doing certain things, then by all means, I will do that if I feel like the need to do that is there. But aside from that, it's it's all the efforts that you can do in the things that you control, the amount of work you're putting in, the introspection that you are doing, and the direction that you are taking, and make sure that the purpose and the meaning is there. The rest of it isn't up to you. Do your best. And then life will throw you curveballs, and sometimes you'll get hit 2, 3, 4 times in a row, and take the hits and move on. It's no different than a boxing match or anything.
How do you get up after the hits you take in life? More an analogy, but how do you get up? Your spirit's broken.
Well, I think part one of this equation is to realize that your spirit isn't broken. Your spirit isn't broken. you are experiencing adversity in a spiritual or intellectual or emotional way, right? And this is an opportunity for you to step up. It's an opportunity for you to start looking at things a little bit more critically. It's an opportunity for you to question if you're doing things right or wrong, and if there's anything you could do better. So I see adversity as an opportunity to validate the work that I put in as a human being to make myself be where I need to be. When adversity hits, I can't lie to myself. I can't. Like if I'm being miserable or if I'm being,
Yeah.
there's no there's no denying that, right? And so the validation is in there. The validation that I got some extra work to do is there, and then that's great. But you really have to have that growth mindset. And quite honestly, man, it's incredible the amount of fun you can have in this life if you have a growth mindset. It's incredible. Like it's almost like you know, a lot of people live in boxes, and those boxes are essentially their freaking grave. Like they will literally die in those boxes when there is so much outside, so much. In fact, life starts at time outside of those boxes. You know, so it's a well balanced operation between some emotional allowable, you know, things that are going to occur, process that you should let occur, and a legal and sorry a logical override that needs to occur so that you may reconcile the two, but they're not going in different directions. They're symbiotic. They're kind of working hand in hand. So it's important to feel the emotions, to let them flow through you. It's also important to regulate them, you know.
For yourself, is jujitsu an avenue to regulate and get things out of your body, your mind, your soul?
Yeah, for sure it is. For me, there's a lot about jiu-jitsu, and one of the things that I try to do when I'm on podcasts is not to extrapolate too long about jiu-jitsu, because you lose like everybody as soon
Yeah,
as you
they're like,
start
what
talking
is
about
that?
jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
But
But not just jiu-jitsu as a whole, like, just moving your body and doing things as a
yeah, man.
person that likes the outdoors. That's what I mean. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's and for those that are data minded, for those that like research projects on various subjects, like you can research the correlation between physical activity and mental and emotional wellness. In fact, inversely, you can also directly correlate some of the worst things that can happen to a human being with being out of shape, compounding those effects. And so, if essentially what I'm saying is that everything you do is either made better or worse by where you are in your physical capabilities, right? And I think a lot of people don't give that enough credit. Like, this is the vehicle, your body is the vehicle that actually carries the package, which is out there feeling and living emotions in this world. If this vehicle has a flat tire, and it has, the frame is bent, and it has a cracked windshield, and you can't see out the back window, and whatever, like, where exactly are you going, and how is this making anything better? Well, the answer is it doesn't. It makes everything worse. And so don't see it as two different things. Those things are not mutually exclusive. You can work on those two things at the same time. You can very well work on your emotional, mental, and intellectual wellness as you are dealing with your physical wellness through various means, whether it's working out, going to yoga, doing some stretching, going out in the woods, doing, hiking, swimming, dancing, freaking name it, you know?
Because I always hear, well, no, sorry, there's this quote that I've heard, and it says, I worked all my life to create wealth, but sacrificed my health. Now I'm spending all my wealth to try and get my health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a very accurate statement. And there's another statement that I find is also very relevant, which is people with health want everything, and people without want one thing. And that's a fact. And I think, having been through some medical issues myself over the last couple of years, I've really gotten to understand like how quickly things can turn, how quickly they can turn, and when they turn, it can come at you very aggressively and be completely relentless. in in the seemingly in the pursuit of getting you down, which isn't the case because nobody's actually controlling that. But um
Yeah, I
and
lost
and
my
so
mom. I lost my mom 3 years ago, 55 years old. She had just turned 55 to cancer, brain cancer. But just, we had 6, 7 months, and you just think that spirit was still there till the very end, like just boom, like functioning, everything. And I was like, how the hell how can you be so brave? I would cave. And there's something in people that, for their families, for others, that you become a warrior. An inner warrior comes out of you, or it's maybe always in you. I don't know.
mhm. Yeah, you know what? First of all, like, my condolences for your loss, and I know exactly what that feels like, because I lost my mom in 2009. She was 48 years old, cancer, died in my arms, kind of similar
Same,
predicament.
same.
You are correct in your assessment. So there is a purpose there. The purpose was, I need to display what it looks like to be courageous when the worst day of your life happens. Like, how am I reacting to things will dictate how my son, my daughters, and the people around me are reacting to certain things. If I'm to make their life better, what kind of tools can I give them so that they may be better equipped to deal with some of the situations that are inherently going to happen? And what best way to do that than to exemplify the behavior when it's critical? I'll sit here and wait. There isn't a way to inspire more than that. And that is precisely, if I had to guess, the reason why she reacted the way she reacted. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's to do things despite the presence of fear. That is true courage. If you're actually not scared of anything, you're just dumb. That's different.
Yeah.
you know? And so I think in the prospect of the biggest unknown to the human experience, which is death, having a warrior like attitude in the face of it sends a very strong message to those that are left behind. And those that are left behind hopefully can step up and send the same message when their time comes. The goal of this life and existence should be that we can benefit from each other's experiences, and we can inspire each other in various ways in various domains. And we do it. And it's funny, man, if you think that you are an individual in this world, just wait until you need people. And maybe it never happens. And maybe when it does and you don't have them, that's the end for you. And maybe that's something you're comfortable with. But man, you can do so much more, achieve so much more personally in your life and in the life of others as a group, and with people that, with meaningful
Look,
things with meaningful people, as I like to
absolutely.
say.
And look what we're doing. I mean, look, there's Sean, you, Satch. There's so many people that have these life stories that, again, need to be shared because there's so many people stuck. And sometimes if they can just listen and hear, hey, you know, Seb was able to do this, so why can't I? Or shift their thinking. That's what it is. Just another way of looking at life. Yeah.
Just look at it from another perspective, and also realize that the power is within you. Power is infinite, and it is within you. And I think that scares us a lot. But also, we need to understand that doing things that make us uncomfortable is the only way to grow. So if you are looking at a situation and it makes you very uncomfortable to address it, because it's making you uncomfortable for a reason. This will promote growth in you. It will promote you being a better person. It will promote you having a better influence on the collective. It
Hmm.
will promote other people to have better lives.
Yeah.
It's really hard to quantify the good that will reverberate in society as we make certain choices. It's really hard to quantify. Like, for example, take policing as an example. Like, how many crimes were avoided? Like, we don't know, right? Because we don't know. Like, it's really hard to track. Like, you can it's really difficult to track things that haven't happened. How much impact has somebody's words having on the lives of many, and how many of those people in turn were able to positively affect other people's lives by having been affected positively themselves by somebody else. So I mean, people speak about legacy, Like legacy was this big thing where you want your name associated with something great that was done. But really, what your legacy should be is how many people have you inspired? How many people have those people inspired? And how many lives overall were made better and easier because of you? That's what we should strive for as humans, in my opinion. And of course, I understand that there's, complexities around that, but let the fluff out. This is life is a very difficult endeavor. It is not easy. And even if you have the best life, it's still not easy. And so it can get ruthless. And there are certain things that will never be affected by the things that you may be able to acquire in life, such as health, for example. Hey, I'm sorry, but if cancer strikes you, I don't care if you're rich, poor, whatever, like you're exactly. And it's really the only justice, if you want to be technical.
Jim Carrey once said, I wish everyone got fame and wealth and all these things early on, just to know that that doesn't bring happiness. Because a
Mhm.
lot of times we put all our focus there, right? And we say, yeah, everything else doesn't matter. How you treat people, how you act and hurt people, doesn't matter. I'm still getting to the top. Ego gets in the way. Keeping that in balance is just, it's not an easy task. How do you become somebody that's kind, humble, not egotistical, but yet still have a backbone in your life so people don't walk all over you?
The only reason why people are associating vulnerability, and I say this with reservations because I don't actually think that it's vulnerability. I think, what is the image that you are portraying, and is this image accurate to who you are? And if it isn't, stop. Just be yourself. And if being yourself isn't good enough, then get better. Like it's not about, well, I don't feel I have insecurities, and everybody has insecurities. Don't get me wrong, but if those insecurities are pushing you in the realm of um, sort of denial and not wanting to address things, or making excuses for yourself, or cutting yourself some slack all the time, or looking around, deflecting blame left, right, and center, and all this good stuff, you're not doing it right. Face the music. Is that simple, right? And it's simple. It's simply said, and evidently, it's a little bit more complex to put into application.
Of course.
Ego is not the enemy. Ego isn't. Ego to a certain extent is healthy. If it's a healthy ego, then it's healthy. It pushes you to perform. It pushes you to excel. It pushes you to want to be better, and it pushes you to want to do a good job in anything you do. And it pushes you, and those things are all positive things. Out of controlled ego is what the issue is. When your ego is actually inflated beyond your reality, you are now living in an alternative dimension where everybody else isn't, and everybody knows. And so, to go back to your comment about Jim Carrey and what he said, in my experience, there's only one type of people that tells people in jiu-jitsu that black belt doesn't matter. Those are all black belts. Nobody else along the way says that. And what Jim Carrey is saying, I understand it differently. What he is actually saying is, money and fame did not make me happy.
No.
I'm still struggling. That's what he is saying. And so the idea that, if my financial problems went away, I'd be completely squared away, is a fallacy. The idea that money isn't important is a fallacy. Money is important, and having financial freedom is the ultimate freedom of expression, because once you have your financial freedom, you can start affecting other people's lives positively, and you can really go after the things that really are meaningful to you. So to say that money doesn't bring happiness is just, it's an easy stated affairs, but really it doesn't speak to all the implications within that statement. So for me, I need to look at the person that's actually delivering that statement, and I know what the status is. There is no secret. Jim Carrey has been very open about some of the struggles that he's had over the years with some mental illness, and I don't even like to call him illness, but And so for him to come out and say this in the way that he did say it, and if you watch him say it, it's quite obvious that what he is saying is that didn't make me happy. And if you are not happy, and if you are not addressing the things that are critically important for you, and you're not balanced, money will not help. And I totally agree with that statement.
Yeah. Fame, chasing money, none
Sure.
of those things will help. But if you're
No.
happy, of course, those things matter. I mean, I think more on the financial freedom side than fame. I think that's,
Sure.
yeah, where I would
Fame
fall.
is such a weird prospect. Anyways,
It's
it's
annoying.
I always laugh at this in the sense that, so I have some very good followers, like on my Instagram. I
Oh
only
yeah.
have like 8,000 of them, right? But they're very engaged, and they're amazing, and they're reaching out and they're talking to me on, on the street or whatever. And it's really interesting because somebody might say, like, look, like your podcast, this podcast, or that podcast really helped me change my life, whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
But for me to walk away from this thinking I changed that person's life, and because I know no, like that person, for all I know, might be a much better dad than me. That person might be a lot better at relationships with their spouse, or maybe they didn't. And so what does that mean? That means that we as humans have something to learn from everyone. And so to put any human on a pedestal is futile, is an exercise in futility as far as I am concerned. It's okay to acknowledge that somebody has strength in a certain area that we have weaknesses in, and that we may use this person as an inspiration to take ourselves to the next level. But what we don't want to do is to associate all other aspects of that person's life with their success, because they're not equal everywhere, as we are not.
What about someone's failure in life? There's a lot to say there because we always say, "Oh, that person's successful. Well, that's amazing. Let's go chat with him." No, it's that guy messed up a lot in life, or that gal messed up. Oh, there's a story there. That's the peaks and valleys of life because we all have that daily. It's up, down, up, down. Refining that balance is not easy, like we said. For you, with failure, failed missions, failed breaches, that's just one thing of life, but it happens every day. How do you deal with failure?
I suppose the question, I guess I'll reverse engineer it a little bit. So if I've prepared properly, and I've done everything I could based on the totality of the circumstances that I knew at the time which I did it, and I fail, then it's a focus on why did I fail despite my best effort, and how do I prevent this from happening in the future?
Right.
If I didn't do my best and I fail, then it's a very harsh conversation with, you dropped the ball. You dropped the ball because you were lazy, because you didn't do what you should have done. And just be happy that nobody got killed, or that, the situation didn't get that much worse, and that you don't have to wear this right now. But just know that this should be an example of what not to do, and stray away from that in the future. But it's a part of the process. When it comes to business, and this is when dealing with physical harm or organizational harm, in business, it's different. In business, there is no real fear of physical harm, right? Really. I mean, unless you're in a very specific business. And yes, there's risk associated to certain, construction or whatever, but I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about from a sort of self-evaluating standpoint. If I'm a business person right now and I try 100 different things to try to make it in the business world, and to find my niche, or to find where I belong,
Mhm.
or the things that I can do that will help my business, do all those things, go nuts. Send all these spaghettis on the walls and see which one sticks, right? Because failing in business is very, very accepted, for one, and then it's very common. And so it destigmatizes it, right? We see failure as this big enemy, I've never failed anything in my life. Well, I'm going to argue you didn't try hard enough, or you didn't go to places where failure rates were so elevated that you actually became a casualty,
So when
right?
someone says they've never failed in life, should we admire them or are they call like they're bullshitting themselves?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is a yes, historical tracking would show otherwise, even if they don't. And so, but it could also be that they are turning in their head whatever is occurring, which would be perceived by most people as a failure, and they see it and they use it as fuel to construct something. Therefore, they're not really seeing it as a failure because it actually stepped me up a bit, right? And I can see that if a person says that, I don't feel like I failed anything in life because everything was needed to be where I am today. I can totally buy that. I have no issue with that, but that's semantics, right?
Mm.
The reality is, if you're breaking it down, the reality is you did fail in this one specific event, but you did not fail to learn from it, right? And this is the key piece. It's like do not fail at learning from your failures. That is the key takeaway, I think, with when it comes to failure. But when you've been on courses and in areas in difficult, units or things where it's 1% or 2% of people make it or whatever, like you end up seeing failure as a very different thing. All these high flyers failing all the time, and at the end of the day, they make it and they're successful in their endeavor. And you're like, just like the rest of these other guys, I failed a bunch of stuff on the way,
Oh
but
yeah.
I'm here,
Yeah.
you know? Having the ability to tactically reposition and actually refocus following a difficult time or following a poor showing or following whatever the case may be is a critical skill. And the faster you can do it, the better it is. I found that, and again, in line with our conversations from earlier, I've had days on the mats where somehow I'm operating 3 ranks below my belt, you know? And I've had really bad days, and I go home and I'm like, man, I really suck today, you know? And then I go back 2 hours later after a bit of food and a 20-minute nap, and I'm a different humans and I'm slaughtering people,
Oh, no.
metaphorically
Yeah.
speaking, right? And so I think that getting back the recognizing what occurred and letting it flow through you is one piece. The other piece is, what am I doing now? What am I doing now? I'm getting back on the mats immediately. Don't shy away. Go back.
Mhm.
You can't possibly be worse than you were 2 hours ago, you know?
Right. But that inner dialogue that we have, can oftentimes hold us back many times over. Um, well, I failed the last 3 times in something. Right? Just probably suck. I should just not do anything with my life. And if I do something, what the next thing I do, I'll probably screw that up again. How do you get out of that mindset? Because that just is spinning. You can't get out.
Yeah, I think a legal. I keep on saying legal. I don't. I was reading so many legal documents this morning that I can't take the word
Yeah.
legal out of my mind. Um, Logic has to take over, right? What you are experiencing is an emotional reaction to your failure. You need to acknowledge that. I'm reacting to this because I'm disappointed.
Yeah.
I'm reacting to this because I'm angry at myself that I wasn't able to perform the way I should have, or that I didn't do the things I should have done, or whatever the case may be, right? And so, yeah, I think understanding your human potential in the context of your human boundaries and understanding that everything is a part of the process and that what you need to be doing is learning what you did wrong and what you did right, or how you could do things differently, and having and creating angles to try to see from a different lens, right? And so the problem with lenses is that if I'm wearing my glasses right now and there's rose colored glasses and I walk around everywhere and I see life through it the entire time, when somebody lends me their green lens, I rediscover the world, right? And so what we don't do though as human beings all the time is to go back to the person that wears the green lenses and ask him to if we could borrow them so that we could see life differently, because there is a certain measure of comfort found in the things that we know. even if it's evil. They say the evil you know is better than the evil you don't know, right? I don't know who are they, but they had a point. I mean, it's really a valid point. And so, how do we seek opportunities to see life through different lens? I'm seeing this now with the program that I'm in. I'm actually now looking at life the way academics have, whereas I was looking at life through the lens of an operational person. But what I did find is my operational lens on things stopped me from learning very beneficial and very valuable tools on the academic side. So, in order to well round myself as a person, having the ability to draw upon experiences from the academic side is critical. You can't discount it fully, and you can't discount being an operational person. Those two marry up perfectly. They just need to happen. And how do you make that happen? Where you recognize that you have a shortcoming. Instead of saying, well, you know, these guys might have all the academic papers in the world, but I have operational experience.
Yes,
I
yes,
was actually on the ground. These guys live in a theoretical world. See what I did there? That's deflection. That's deflecting. It makes me feel better about myself. It makes me feel better about my inadequacy. And it doesn't do anything to help me. It just, all it does is bring a negative wind to my mindset. And it also further cement that I should be continuing to be mediocre. Whereas if I decide to take it, and it doesn't have to be in a master's program, it doesn't have to be in any program. It just has to be what it is that you want to be that will contribute to make you a better person. Maybe that's being a yoga coach, or maybe it's just being completing your on-ramp program at CrossFit. Like, I don't know,
whatever you
but
need to
those,
do. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
And so I diverted away from the question a bit, but I kind of went on an interesting segue
I
here.
like
So I
that.
just,
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, man. And what does your sweater say? That's cool. Whatever that is. The logo.
yeah, this is True Dark. So it's a company from the UK, former special operators, I believe four of them, SBS, Special Boat Services, SAS, one of them was, I believe, maybe two. And just great UK company. I'm all for encouraging local companies, but they are going to need to pick up their socks because these guys are killing it in and yes, it's a bit more pricey and everything, but the quality is absolutely
Mm,
incredible. It's all built in Italy, and you're getting Italian made clothing, whether it's hoodies or pants or whatever. And I found their stuff to be not only from a clothing standpoint, but the mentality behind their business
right.
is exactly in line with,
True Dark.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
T H R U
Yeah.
THRUDARK.
Do you think do we have some in Canada? I think we do, but they're just like you said, they're not really.
Well, we have Arteryx would be the closest thing,
Yeah.
and Arteryx to me is decent, but it isn't. It isn't at the level of True Dark by a long shot. But also with that, the mentality behind True Dark, in my opinion, of course, having lived life the way I have, resonates and excuse me, speaks to me. And
Interesting.
so I'll always be very quick to encourage and support people that doing it right for the right reasons, that are from a mindset perspective in line with sort of the mission I'm on, which is to try to inspire and try to at least be a positive contributor
Absolutely.
in
Yeah, I'm
this
so
lifetime,
happy. I told Sean the same thing is we need more of you guys out there sharing these stories. I mean, you see it in the States. You got David Goggins, you've got Jocko, but we don't have anybody here. So I'm so happy you guys are literally creating a pathway for all, to open up and say, hey, you know what? If Seb can do it, why can't I talk? That conversation, right? It's okay to talk.
Man, it's really funny too, because people have a tendency to self-deprecate when it comes to conversation and their ability to carry on or to bring insightful things into a conversation. And some of the best conversations I've had were with random strangers in the
Oh yeah,
steam room. You know, it's like I'm at the pool in the steam room, Having conversations with somebody I don't even know for 5 minutes, and next thing I know, we're 17 level deep into this super,
Mhm.
uh, introspection of inner workings of humanity and whatever. And I'm like, Jesus, man, where that came from, and I think we're underestimating, we're vastly underestimating how beneficial that is. And in a lot of ways, the problems that we have as humans are often things that we don't discuss with others.
Mhm.
When somebody chokes in a restaurant, what do?
Look around and
They go to the washroom to isolate themselves from whatever is occurring so that they can preserve face while they're dying.
oh yes,
Instead,
yes,
you know what I mean? Instead of staying in public, making it quite obvious. So having the conversations about certain topics simply shows everybody else that we are all going through this together at different times. But we're all in this together. None of us is going out and oh yeah, this was perfect. It didn't affect me, and I didn't have any sort of reactions to this, or it's not
right,
my breakup isn't, mine was harder than everybody else's, and you know what I mean.
yes.
And so having some sort of conversation pipeline is very useful in preventing you from going down the rabbit hole of I'm the only one in the world, which further fuels the victim mentality. So I say talk away, have
Mhm.
conversations. And I love to listen to people that in theory may have less to contribute. And you start listening and you're like, wow, I just got a whole lot out of that conversation.
Well, thank you for your time today, Seb. I appreciate it. We did it.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely, brother.